I'm Jonathan. I'm joined here with Jen from Atlas Realty, and we're here to help you be a better landlord. All right, let's start with your sort of personal story. You're a real estate agent. You have been for, you said, around 20 years?
Uh-huh.
How did you start into investing, and also why did you start investing?
So I didn't ever want to be a real estate investor or a real estate agent. And there were like all of these memes, and they're kind of funny. Like South Park has one, like how a real estate agent isn't ever anyone's A game.
Not your first choice?
But it's worked out really well for me and my family. I have my degree in human services, and I was going to go to DU. I got accepted to DU to get my master's in social work because I wanted to be like a counselor. And through college, I worked at like a battered women's shelter and like an AIDS daycare. And so like just things that have meaning to me, like making a difference in society. But I didn't mean to get into real estate. When my daughter was born, she was born with a heart defect. And she had to have open heart surgery when she was 3 days old. And then after that, she got diagnosed with cystic fibrosis because they did a newborn screen. So like when you have a baby, they prick their ankle and take some blood, and it came back positive. So when that came back positive, she was in the hospital. She had sepsis after her heart surgery, which is like a blood infection. It was really bad. Like we didn't know if she was going to live. And it just seemed like really overwhelming for me and for my husband at the time. Like I wasn't thinking like, oh, I should go back to grad school. It was like, how am I going to keep this child alive? It was so scary. Like I would have to measure how deep her indentations were on her ribs. Like if she had pneumonia, was she breathing okay? Was she absorbing her food? And eventually she got better, but cystic fibrosis is a fatal disease. And so they said that she would probably live to be like 20 or maybe 30. And so it was really, really scary.
Yeah.
Our condo that we had, it was 800 square feet. It had, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, no air conditioning. And my daughter would cry all day because she was so uncomfortable because she didn't have air conditioning.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, I need a house. We're like, we can't afford a house. And I'm like, well, I'm going to get my real estate license and we're going to use that commission. We're going to buy a house. And that's the reason why like I got started in real estate. And then I'm like, well, if I did this for myself, I know some friends, I can stay home with my daughter. I finished my degree, but I didn't go to grad school. And if you have a degree in social work, but not a graduate degree, at that time, it was like $12 an hour. Like I couldn't afford just to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I would run one deal maybe every 3 months and stay home with my daughter. And that's how I got into real estate. That's not very sexy, right? Like, that's amazing.
Well, I mean, but it does show why real estate can be so great. I mean, it gave you that flexibility that you needed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you became a real estate agent. But what about investing yourself? When did you start getting into rentals?
So my daughter, as she grew up, she started getting sicker. I had my son. So I have this newborn baby now, and then my daughter is really, really sick. With cystic fibrosis, you get like lung infections, and then eventually they can't get treated anymore. The antibiotics stop working, and so you get lung infections, and then eventually you pass away. So like she was like on her second lung infection or something, and she was in the hospital, and I became suddenly single. So I'm like a sole parent. I've got this daughter who's really sick, and then I've got this newborn baby, and I'm going crazy. And at this time, I'm in this small house, but it's a nice house. It's like in the Cherry Creek School District, and my payment wasn't very much, but my baby was getting up every couple of hours because he's a baby. My daughter was crying because she was sick. Like she's having troubles in school. My house was underwater because it was the recession of like 2010. So it was worth like $50,000 less than I bought for it. So I rented it out, and I went and I lived next to one of my best friends. I did a rent to own, and that's how I got my first rental. And the rent just covered the mortgage. And then eventually I was able to purchase that house that I rented out next to my best friend. And Maya had started to stabilize. My best friend, she's like Harvard educated, and she got her license to be a dietitian. And so she was like, hey, you need to take out sugar. You need to do grass-fed meat. You need to do lots of greens that are organic. And so Maya's inflammation went down. So she was able to get off a lot of her antibiotics and a lot of her inhalers and things like that. And we got more stable. So it was like all the things happened, but I wasn't doing it to invest in real estate. I was doing it for survival. I was doing it to be part of a community. And we took the fences down, and my best friend and her husband helped me raise my kids, and my daughter got better. And then I realized, hey, I have this rental now. I'm able to buy this second house. The cash flow from the first rental is paying for like our groceries and our internet. And now I have like $50,000 in equity in this house. I'm starting to build some equity in this one. And at this time, I had gotten into commercial real estate because with really young kids, I didn't want to work like all nights and weekends for residential real estate. So I thought I would just learn commercial, and that would be easier. It's not easier. So I was learning all about like cap rates, and in this area, actually in River North, we were buying buildings and then subdividing them, like renting them out to artists and valuing the buildings, and the buildings were just going crazy in equity, right? So I learned commercial real estate. That firm left, went to California because they made so much money. And then that's when I met Atlas. They bought one of my listings in cash, and I met Mike, who taught me how to do the multifamily, because multifamily is like a blend between residential and commercial, meaning it's valued like commercial, but it's houses. So I started being able to do that, helping other investors get rentals, learning how to value them, learning how to do the multifamily, which is completely different. And then when my best friend moved away, I didn't want to stay in that neighborhood by myself anymore. So I got a third house where I wanted to live. And then I had 2 rentals. And then it just started to kind of snowball that from there. But it's not like, oh, I just got these rentals over these 2 years. It took a really long time.
It took a while. And how did you decide, when those, because you were working as a real estate agent, I'm sure you came upon listings all the time that seemed like a good idea. How did you decide on those specifically?
I am trained to do pro formas. So when we do pro formas, we put in the bedroom count, the bathroom count, the market rent, the expenses. And like, I know a B class house has maybe a 35% expense ratio. We get a cap rate, and then we get like the appreciation trajectory. And then we know, like, because I'm trained, I work with the guys that do the acquisitions for the funds, like school district and the age of the home. And there's all these metrics. And so I'm doing this for other people, right? For myself, I found an off-market deal through one of my friends, and they gave it to me for like $50,000 under value, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, west side of Denver. And it was pretty. We could pick out the different colors, but I didn't intend to make that a rental. But the problem is that real estate is kind of addictive, because you're like, oh my gosh, this other house, it appreciated $100,000, and this one, and so the houses start to make more money in appreciation than you're making at your job. And you're like, well, how am I going to retire? And then for me, I'm like, how am I going to pay for the kids' colleges? And how am I going to have time and money? It gets addictive because you see these deals. And so for me, I would be willing to do some more houses. Some of my friends and my investors have like 100, and then some of the guys at Atlas have like 1,000. So I don't think that I'm that big of a landlord, but when I go out, I'm still pretty weird, right? Like, you're not supposed to be a single mom with multiple houses, right? Yeah. Like, if I'm like being a stereotypical single mother, I'm supposed to have like 2 or 3 jobs, and my kids are supposed to be latchkey kids. And that is not my family. And that is why I work so hard.
But that's awesome. I mean, that's like, it sounds like, 2010-ish was kind of the low point of like, it sounds truly like it was a really, really hard time for you, and things are a lot better now, right? Like, real estate helped you get back that time and money and provide for your family.
It did. And Maya got sicker after 2010 because with cystic fibrosis, there are certain bacteria that that are just really bad. Yep. So like, as a normal person, if you get a bacteria, you'll just fight it off. Like, there's this bacteria that is the nemesis of cystic fibrosis patients. It's called Pseudomonas. And it's like, if you look at like a lake and you see the sheen on top of the water, that's Pseudomonas. And so it lives in water. It lives in plants. And the doctor was always like, she's going to get this one day. But I don't know if stubborn is the right word, but I'm an analyst, right? So like, I don't just do that in real estate. I was researching who's old and has cystic fibrosis. What are they doing, right?
Yeah.
So just constantly learning, constantly doing different things. And I kept her away from Pseudomonas until she was 16. But when she was 16, she got Pseudomonas and the antibiotics didn't work. So at this point, I'm out of options in the United States. So now I'm looking international.
Wow.
And so we found a medicine out of Tbilisi, Georgia, which is not Georgia.
Not the state.
I was looking up, I have pictures of Georgia, and there were like these orcas, and I'm like, this is not the right Georgia. It's like by Russia.
Yeah.
And so I've been so blessed and so just taken care of by God in my life that one of my clients was actually cousins with the head of the NIH. So I was like, what should I do? And my mom found this magazine article about the biophage. And so I asked my client, we ran it through the head of the NIH. I'm like, okay, I'll go get it. So I went and got the medicine, and then I had her inhale it and put it down her nose, and she got better. and that enabled us to get to the point where in 2019, ironically, when COVID hit, they finally came out with a medicine for cystic fibrosis where she can have close to a normal lifespan, where I'm not putting phages up her nose anymore.
Wow.
But I just think, like, with my journey, if I didn't have my real estate, I wouldn't have been able to take the couple months off and research that. I would have gone under financially. I wouldn't have met the level of people to help me and guide me through that process. And it's just been incredibly, incredibly blessed.
That's amazing. Cool. I don't know where to go from there. I guess I could segue this into somebody wanting to get started today. You know, if there's somebody else who's watching this who's in like...
Well, I would say that you use your problems to fuel you instead of like saying, I can't do this, right? Like, what if I said, I'm a single mom, I'm a sole mom, which I think is different than a single mom, right? Like, I don't have any backup. I'm going to work harder and I'm going to figure out a way, and my kids are not going to die, and we're going to live in a nice neighborhood, and I'm going to be there for my son's baseball, right? Like, I am so driven to have this life where I can provide this shelter, this stability for my family. I want other people to use their problems like that, right? Because having someone sick in your family isn't an issue just for me, right? Like, most people know someone that's sick in their family. And in my generation, the Gen X, like, we're in a place where our kids are growing up. We're having expenses like, oh, my son, he's 16 today. Like, he needs a car, right? My daughter, she needs her tuition paid for, or living expenses, right? Like, I'm paying for that. And then a lot of my friends, their parents are aging. And so you get in this sandwich, and it's, I don't know if it's more for women, but like, I think it's just for everyone, where you have so much responsibility on both sides, and then you're trying to take care of yourself. And how are you going to do that if you don't have something working for you? So I like real estate because if you put 25% down on your house, you get the appreciation of 100% of your assets. So I think it works a lot faster if you do the analytics, and it's just like a huge math problem of which market has the most positive migration, and which market has the best landlord laws, and how can you help the most people. And you do that analytic, and then it'll just work so fast for you versus like, I don't know, when I was struggling, I did this Dave Ramsey class, and he's like, just have like a little envelope of cash so you don't go over your budget. Like, I don't know how many Starbucks I would have to skip. My life would be completely different without real estate. So I would say for other people, use your why to drive you instead of an excuse like, oh, I can't work. You know, I have all of these obligations, and you just get paralyzed with all of the things. So that's like personal development, and I love personal development and figuring out how to problem solve.
Absolutely. And there's so much like within real estate investing, within the community and the coaches and all that, there's a lot of like the hustle mentality of like, go, go, go. I mean, you mentioned that some of the people you work with even have maybe thousands of properties. How do you know that you have enough? And also, like, where do you draw that line between, well, I'm done with work and now it's family time?
So for me, like when I was growing up, my parents were getting divorced, and I got in like a lot of trouble, and I was on my own a lot. And so for me, my hard line is I will be there for my son. And I was there for my daughter. My daughter is a little bit older. She still needs me, but my son is 16 today. So I'm going to have an adult presence in that house in the evening. I'm going to go to his baseball games. I'm going to know who his friends are. He's going to have enough money to, like go to the movies and go out to eat with his friends and do different things, right? Where I was already working, right? Like, because I've been on my own probably since I was about 16. I don't want him to have to do that. Like, I will work so hard that I will burn my adrenals out, right? So like for my child, sometimes I'm at baseball. Like, baseball is over for November before spring, so I have like a little bit of a break, but it is a lot. And it's kind of sad because it's becoming a sport that you have to have money to do, right? Like his fees were $700 for the fall, and they're going to be like $2,500 for the spring. There's summer travel teams, different things. Like, I'm there, but I could be doing an extra 3 or 4 deals a month, right? When I was doing the inventory placement for Atlas, I would get a shopping list. I need 5 apartments here, 4 houses here, these listings, these consultations, you're going to get all of these through. And I did it, but all of my wheels came off, right? Like, I had a house cleaner and a gardener, and I wasn't there for my kids, and I'm not doing that anymore. And so like, I would say, figure out what's the most important thing to you and then go for that. And then when life shifts, you can add in more. So I don't want to work 100 hours a week right now. Could I work 100 hours a week and make more money? Sure. But I don't want to.
Yeah.
And I don't have to anymore. I'm like, I have this little sign that my friend got me, and it says, I do what I want. And I want to get to that place, where I have some more freedom over my time.
Do you feel like you have a goal of like X number of rental properties, X amount of passive income that you're striving for?
I think like 10,000 a month would be good. For me, for some of my clients, they're like 50,000 a month. For my parents, who, by the way, told me not to invest in real estate, they're like, do not move out of that house. Well, in my scenario, they're like, that is ridiculous. You're going to start investing in real estate? No. Now they have like 3 or 4 rentals, right? And so they get an extra 3,000 a month, and that enabled them to retire 5 years early. How much is 5 years of retirement worth for you? $3,000. It's not that much.
Yeah.
So I would say like, it depends on the person, how much is enough. Me, my mind works really fast. And so if I like stopped working, I would have to do something.
Yeah. You'd go crazy?
Maybe. I don't know. So I don't know how much is enough.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I feel like we see it a lot from investors of like, some people just don't know when to stop. And like you said, real estate is addictive. You really get into it and you get obsessed with analyzing deals, and maybe there's a better deal out there. Maybe I'll just do one more.
And you figure out the patterns like, oh my gosh, if I buy this zoning project, this is an extra 200,000. This is an extra 300,000. Like, how can I get into that game? Oh my gosh, for this investor, we bought an apartment and we just put washer and dryers in the units and the value went up 400,000. Like, it's so much money,
Yeah, it is. Well, you kind of already did it with giving advice, but what advice would you give to yourself or somebody like you back when you were younger, maybe back to you in 2010?
I would say find a mentor, find someone that has done the thing before you. But back in 2010, I didn't even know that this was an option. So I think the best advice is to do the next best thing, even if it's kind of scary. For me, I knew that I would just break down like if I had stayed where I was. And so I did the next best thing, even if it was kind of hard. And then the next step appears and the next step appears, right? And if you're in the real estate game and you already know that that's where you want to go, that's further ahead than I was. I didn't know that that was an option. I don't come from money. My parents told me that was a terrible idea to do, right? So my cousins told me that was terrible. They're like, well, the lifespan of a house is 40 years. And so if you buy a house that's 40 years, you're just going to lose a lot of money. And I'm like, no. But there's so much fear, and it just freezes people. So get around really good people that are smarter than you. Let people guide you. Be honest, do the next best thing, right? And take care of people.
I love it. That's great. All right. Well, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
My telephone number is 303-514-8491. RealAtlas.com is my company website, and my name is Jennifer Reinhardt.
Awesome. All right, Jen. Well, thank you so much. If you out there have any other questions or comments you'd like to leave for us, put them down below.